about it. But if you ever see pictures with he and his kids, always happy. If you see him perform, always happy. So there's this weird dichotomy, which I think makes him the most incredible entertainer.
I don't know if I'll ever know. I think reams have already been written about what happened to this person who we see there at 8 years old or whatever, just joyous.
Yeah.
And I Want You Back is just, to this day, that song makes me smile. And then how a few years ago, he's this figure a pale figure under an umbrella walking into a child molestation trial. And how that happened over 30 years, I don't know that we'll ever know the whole story, but as you're saying, I mean, it was the 80s that this withdrawal began. And I think that was at the root of it, was a withdrawal. And then, someone else earlier talked about, I think Susan Blond talked about the wall of people around him. And
so
then he had
he had this wall of people around him, and yet at the same time, he was this recluse. I mean, who was really close to him, if anyone?
He went through a series of assistants, as I understand, and I think there was probably a lot of paranoia there, and a lot of, and he felt most comfortable, of course, with children, with small children, and Jeff said earlier he had an unhealthy relationship with children, and on some level that may have been, but I also think he genuinely loved them and felt.
He also had these very high-profile friendships, as we know, Elizabeth Taylor and Brooke Shields, and I want to bring back Brian Monroe, who had the very last interview with Michael Jackson again at Ebony Magazine, and Brian, what in your conversations with him, I mean, why did you want to do this piece? What were you trying to get at with him, and what was most striking to you about what he told you?
Well, it was the piece was done on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Thriller, the biggest selling album in modern music history. And he talked a lot about the making of that album, the music making process, working with a German guy from the group Heatwave named Rod Temperton, and how they would battle back and forth and who could write the best song, and they'd send them up to Quincy Jones, who was producing that album, and have Quincy almost bless them. And so there was a competitive spirit about him too. And the other part is interesting. You had Neo on earlier. He talked about Neo and how much he respected Neo's music and how he was keeping abreast of the modern music, and talked about wanting to go into the studio and working on this comeback album that unfortunately was never meant to be.
We're also joined by Gideon Diego, former MTV correspondent. You interviewed Michael Jackson.
Yeah, this was back in 2001 at his last big sort of coming out affair, where he had this 25-year anniversary concert that he was doing around Madison Square Garden.
How did he seem to you? I mean, you had obviously seen him from afar a lot.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've been talking about, or that you hear about the isolation and the distance that he put between people. It was just a bizarre experience. It was like talking to someone on a satellite delay.
Even though he was right next to you.
Right there. Yeah. And my initial impression was, this guy is on something. And then, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, he was out on stage popping and locking and dancing like the most professional and incredible entertainer I'd ever seen. And I think that's part of kind of the dichotomy of it. 5 months ago, he was uninsurable. And then once the concert series in London actually went public and they found someone to insure against it, it sold out in 5 hours. And it just gives you an idea of the complexity of him as an icon and the complexity of him as a celebrity. That there was so much darkness and yet the capacity to perform in such an amazing way, and for so many fans.
Anderson, no one has said, at least on this panel, and I'm still nervous, I'm still shaken by it. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this is very daunting and a tough day for the music industry. Michael transcended race before Michael Jordan, before Oprah, before Tiger Woods, before Barack Obama. Michael Jackson was the one who sold 60 million records. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that. So when you talk about Diego, of how he could go on that stage in a matter of minutes, turn it on, that hasn't been really focused on a lot today from driving down here and listening on the radio.
A song?
That he transcended
by Paul Beckman, Polyable Song. These are a series of songs in tribute and legacy for Michael Jackson.
He was certainly the first African American act to be featured prominently on MTV.
I didn't know about him that much, but he dotted history now and then. He was in the news,
featuring predominantly white
famous standoff.
he sang a lot.
Drew a line in the sand and said,
This is
we
a
believe
legacy
in this guy,
in
and you're going to play his
his
videos,
honor
or we're playing all our
for
videos.
Michael Jackson.
These
songs
and
Let
hearing
me bring
about more
Roland Martin
about
back in. He's
him
on the
and what his
telephone
life
with
was
us.
like.
Roland, of course, has talked to some of the family
this
members,
news
and I
is
know
going
Roland,
on.
just to follow on the point being made,
The song is going to be
he
called.
was a huge crossover star, a massive African
Michael
American fan,
Jackson was a huge
white
crossover
fan.
star.
I mean, probably one of the first,
using guitar
certainly on that
chords
level.
A and C sharp minor.
I don't think
Created
people
June 25th,
truly
2009,
understand
the day that he
how
died.
major Michael Jackson was in terms of breaking down those kinds of barriers. When you talk about MTV, there was no doubt.
Let me turn it up a little bit more.
Any black artists, and they initially denied Michael Jackson. But when he down there, it all exploded. He broke down those barriers. When you look at how he was
Michael Jackson was a huge crossover star. He crossed over into many different levels of music. A crossover star. A crossover star. Selling huge amounts of his music. As a businessman, he owns part of the Beatles and invested in many other high-profile musicians and bands. Michael Jackson. He used to be in the Jackson 5 when he was younger, younger. Michael Jackson. A legacy for him. A legacy
Sorry,
for
Roland, I
him.
gotta jump in here. Roland,
Michael Jackson.
Standing outside listening.
Michael Jackson.
At about 1,300 hours today, Mr. Jackson was transported from this location by paramedics to UCLA Medical Center. At about 2:30 in the afternoon, Mr. Jackson was pronounced over at UCLA Medical Center. About 4 o'clock this afternoon, Robbery Homicide Division was notified of this incident and directed by the Chief of Police to come out and handle the death investigation. Currently, the LA County Coroner's Office is taking possession of Mr. Jackson's body. They will handle any other inquiries into the type of death or anything as it relates to that at that point in time.
Is there any signs inside that he was over-medicated?
I have no further information than what I gave you at this
Can you
time.
tell us what you were looking for inside, Lieutenant, and what you saw and found?
Again, like I said, I have no further information to give you at this time. I'm sorry, but at this point in time, it's a coroner's investigation. So any of those questions will have to be directed to the LA County Coroner's Office.
Is it a suspicious death, Lieutenant? Is it suspicious death?
What room he was in and where he was when he was stricken?
The Los Angeles Police Department handles death investigations every day. Robbery homicide was assigned to this because of the high-profile nature of it. Don't read into anything as it relates to my team being here. Just by the fact of all of you being here caused the chief to decide that we should handle this investigation. So, I've got nothing else for you guys. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, now everybody, let's be more respectful. Get back off the property. Thanks very much.
Yeah, that was Greg Strank you just heard right there from the LA Police Department, who again, not giving us a whole lot of detail on their investigation ongoing, but he said don't read in too much into it. The fact that homicide's investigating, it's more that this is a media circus. Let's be honest about it. They're going to put their top people on it.
We're also anticipating a press conference from the hospital any moment.
Let's go back though. Kara Fenstrom is outside the house where the news conference just took place. Kara, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, Campbell, as you just heard from the LA detective, they have been in there for a little while this afternoon, conducting an investigation that they say is just regular protocol, especially after the death of someone as high profile as Michael Jackson. This area has been completely sealed off to the public, so not a lot of his fans here. What we do have here is a lot of media, a lot of international media as well, which just kind of, again, speaks to the reach of Michael Jackson. But again, at this hour, they are still inside, continuing to conduct their investigation.
All right, Kara Fenstrom for us, coming from the house in Los Angeles. Again, as Anderson mentioned, you can see the crowd gathered. That's actually the hospital, the shot you're looking at right now, where we are expecting a press conference shortly with more information, hopefully, from the hospital.
The other thing to consider, I mean, again, as we look at some of these young pictures of Michael Jackson, where he is, you know, I think started performing at 5 years old on TV the first time at 11, Gideon, you know, he talked later in his life in that famous interview to, I think, to Ed Bradley and to others about basically being kind of an abused child, of abuse at the hands of his dad and ridicule at the hands of his father.
There was obviously a lot of toxicity in that family, and that's something that they have vetted over the years. But I think, without getting into the particulars of that, when you look at Michael Jackson's career as a whole, the fact that he was a signed recording artist for the first really major cross-racial boundary breakout band on Motown's label since the age of 11, you are never, I think, ever going to have a recording artist that is going to have that kind of a legacy and that kind of an impact.